Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dell. If you're new to the channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. In today's segment, we're going to be talking about the spiritual afflictions that's going to be extrapolated when Pluto enters Aquarius on November 19th for 19 years. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, get those notes out. It's time to get to it because there's a proliferating amount of information that we're going to be demonstrating to you guys tonight. So we're going to go all the way down the rabbit hole tonight, right? We're going to go deep down into the rabbit hole because there's a lot of information we're going to cover tonight, right? So the last time, when you understand the historical context of everything within the simulation, everything operates on cycles, right? So the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius, we had the Haitian Revolution from 1791 to 1804. And it says right here verbatim that the Haitian Revolution was a successful insurrection by self-liberated slaves against the French colonial rule in Saint Dominique, right? Then you also had the French Revolution. The French Revolution was a period of a political and societal change in France. So the same thing that's actually taking place in American soil right now, when you're talking about the societal and a geopolitical economic reset that works in tandem with the sustainable development goals, when you're talking about, agenda for 2030, because everything they got to do within the factions of Pluto being in Aquarius for 19 years, they got to start right now in 2024 as we transition in 2025. Also, when Pluto was in Aquarius, we had the Irish Rebellion of 1798, which was basically a popular insurrection against the British Crown that basically demonstrate a subordinate energy. And then you also had the American Revolution. The American Revolution was a rebellion and a political movement in the 13 colonies, which peaked at the colonists initiated in an ultimate successful war. So you also see the number 13 because 13 is also the embodiment of the matriarch, right? That's a matriarchal number. So everything that you're seeing right now that's taking place when you're talking about Pluto being in Aquarius, right now, the deep state has pretty much lost its legs because it's basically the end of a corporation. Because as I was telling you before in my last transition, when I was telling you about how Obama was basically the last president of the Roman occupational government, right? So his presidency was basically predicated against, it was basically, how can I say it? It was basically missionary work. It wasn't a real presidency. So it was basically the end of the corporate system of the de facto corporation, right? It was the end of the corporate powers that controlled the three city states. So now the deep state, they got to have some type of black swan event to basically eradicate the process of the restoration of the republic. So we looking at a different, many different afflictions that can take place on American soil. So we looking at, a possible shutdown in the future. You're looking at Al Sudani will meet with Kurdistan on Wednesday. Donald Trump will meet with Joe Biden on Wednesday. The Federal Reserve is meeting next Wednesday because, the U.S. dollar has basically lost, an intrinsic amount of value, right? And then you have 195 countries basically eradicated the dollar. They stepped away from it. And then you have the World Leaders Action Climate Summit is next Wednesday. And then you got the IMB and the WHO are having a meeting next Wednesday, and then the House's meeting on UFOs is scheduled for next Wednesday as well, right? So all this stuff, all these meetings is basically setting a blueprint and a tone and a frequency for what is to come when Pluto enters Aquarius for 19 years, right? Not a coincidence. Now, when I say that everything is not a coincidence, because people who are highly spiritual, we know that everything in the simulation is not a coincidence. Everything has a process of cycles in order to create this chaos and order, or where you get order out of chaos, right? So it tells you right here in a tweet that the United States House has announced a hearing on UFOs scheduled for November 13th, which is today, where the lawmakers are expected to discuss recent reports, government transparency, and potential national security implications of unidentified aerial phenomenon, right? So now when you go to this publication right here, this is basically a memorandum from the Congress. And they're basically talking about the UFO hearing that's going to be taking place when you're talking about unidentified anomalous phenomenon that's floating in our atmosphere, right? So that's imperative to know, because during this process of the 19 years of when Pluto enters Aquarius, there's going to be so much confusion, so much desolation, so much affliction, so many different, spiritual afflictions, DNA metamorphosis. It's going to be so many things that's happening at one point in time all together, that a lot of people are not going to know how to take the shift that's taking place on the planet when you're talking about the reset. So it tells you right here, there is a hearing about the UFOs with Congress in DC, right? And the reason they having this hearing is because recently Earth received a laser communication sent from nearly 500 million kilometers away. And this is coming from the Great Discoveries channel and the Daily Galaxy publication, which also works in tandem with the publication of the news. And it talks about the former Israeli space security chief says extraterrestrial exists and Trump knows about it. And then it talks about the Galactic Federation has been waiting for humans to reach a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are, right? So it's not a coincidence that they put this in a mass media publication, right? So it's not a conspiracy. Because one thing you got to understand about Donald Trump, even though he's a double agent, he is still going to, propagate the truth to the point where it's going to basically eradicate the deep state shadow government and all the lies they've been basically hiding all throughout the years of the Piscean Age of Darkness, which was basically the age of illusion, right? So now I'm going to get into some videos, because Trump knows about UFOs, right? This is not a coincidence. So the first video I'm going to show you.
Do you think you'd know if there were evidence of extraterrestrials?
Well, I think our great pilots would know. And some of them really see things that are a little bit different than in the past. So we're going to see, but we'll watch it. You'll be the first to know.
I believe, as do the other folks that were on the flight, that when we visually saw it, that it was something not from this world.
When presumably you expressed that belief to your superiors, what did they say?
Actually, we caught a lot of grief getting back to the boat, and it got passed off as an event that no one could explain. Now, keep in mind, they had been tracking these for 2 weeks prior to us seeing it, and this was the first time that manned airplanes had been airborne when the objects appeared.
This feels like a really big story to me. It's not exactly clear why Vladimir Putin's more interesting than.
See, when stuff like this is coming into mass media, that basically denotes the fact that something is going to be taking place, because who is flying these UFO crafts, right? And we finna get into that as we get through the presentation. But I have another video that basically demonstrates that ideology that Donald Trump knows about extraterrestrial life on the planet, right? We finna get into it today. We finna make it all make sense, because there's a lot of stuff, to where people are not getting the clarification when it comes to extraterrestrial species, because they so subjected to monotheistic religion. So I'm gonna play this video for you.
So I met with pilots like beautiful Tom Cruise, but taller, Okay? Handsome, perfect people. Sir, there was something there that was round in form and going like 4 times faster than my super jet fighter plane. And I look at these guys and they really mean it.
Yeah.
And am I a believer? No, I can't say I am. But I have met with people that are serious people that say there's some really strange things that they see flying around.
See, it's going to get interesting while he's in office because, first of all, he's going to demonstrate the same, propagation of truth that JFK did, and you see what happened to him. So don't be surprised during this process of, the true light being, giving people the edification about the real truth about extraterrestrial life on the planet. Don't be surprised if he's unalive for doing such by the deep state shadow government. And it's all going to be staged because everything they do is basically premeditated, right? Now, and it tells you right here, Donald Trump's UFO files, the Don set to finally release the sacred government files on existence of aliens within weeks. Then you also have this because they can't hide the truth no more. They got to give you the truth. They got to tell you what's going on because you having all these anomalies, all these world mysteries on the planet popping up at one point in time because we're going through a cosmic shift. The more stuff start to shift on the planet, the more you see different geographical land masses start to pop up, many different oceans found, different mountains, different pyramids, portals being built up. The more that this happens, the more they have to tell you about extraterrestrial life, especially during a time when Pluto was in Aquarius, right? So it tells you right here, scientists have found a sixth ocean that is 430 miles under the surface, right? And remember that guy, he came out on national television and he was talking about his experience when he went into deep inside the ocean and how there were basically different land masses within the factions of that ocean, right? So there's different worlds within the simulation. So, and he was basically unalive for putting out that truth, right? So, like I said, the more that you see these colossal coronal mass ejections that is giving off these gamma radiation frequencies, and these is going to activate the prominences of Mother Nature, right? And the prominences of Mother Nature is going to activate the chakras of planet Earth, which are basically the tectonic plates. So you're going to have the shifting of land masses, right? You're going to have new species, new animals are going to start to pop up. They cannot hide this truth no more. Certain animals, certain insects or whatever, a lot of them are really extraterrestrial species, but when they're going to come to the surface, coming from, many different places, when you're talking about Argartha, Shambhala, the Rainbow City, the Crystal City, all this stuff is acclimated to the mythology of Hollow Earth. And these entities, these new species is going to come from the caverns of the earth. And they got to demonstrate that in the mass media. They got to give you full disclosure about extraterrestrial life. And the perfect person to do that is with Donald Trump, right? So it tells you right here, it says right here verbatim, NASA's new close-up on solar flare recording looks unreal. You got all these solar flares that's hitting the planet because it's operating on fractions of light, and the cymatic frequencies is collaborating with the moon and the sun at the same time. That's cultivating a form of balancement, which is basically a form of the restoration of nature, right? Which is connected to the Republic and the matriarch. So now, we got to get into the fact that who is flying these UFOs? We hearing about UFO talk, right? And there's a video, shout out to the Return of Non-Ether, who demonstrated this synopsis in a form of a video on his Instagram. And it's basically going to tell you about highly, activated, genetically activated extraterrestrial species who are basically are an amalgamation of black women. It's an amalgamation of black women who have dreadlocks, and I think they come from the Andromeda star constellation, I believe, right? And they have this Amazonian body type, which basically denotes the fact that that's connected to Wonder Woman, right? Where they get that, ideology and they put it inside the Marvel and the comic book movies or whatever. All this is stuff is talking about your story. They're talking about your ancestors. They talking about, beings that come from different star systems, interdimensional, outer dimensional, extraterrestrial species who are so-called black people, right? I'm gonna play the video. And a person I think that's speaking in the video, I think his name is Barry Littleton. He's been in the UFO phenomenon, talking about UFOlogy and eschatology for many different years, since like the 1990s. But I'm gonna play this video for you.
The contactee that the beings that came to her were these dreadlock black women from Andromeda that are more of the Amazon type, right? And that they are actually represented in entertainment quite a bit. And that would be actually not just Wonder Woman, but when you look at things like Guinan on Star Trek The Next Generation, she still had the dreads. Okay, you've got Michonne on The Walking Dead, she's got the dreads. And that these black women show up occasionally showing in our entertainment. So that's another deal there.
You're saying that some of these beings are represented in our medias and our entertainment. So that would assume that there are some of us who are creating these medias that are aware of these individuals, yes? That are aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've got others like even the X-Men, you've got Storm, and you've got these other melanin-dominant females that are being seen on television right now quite a bit. So I think that's representative of not just how we're seeing so much the equality of the feminine coming in right now, but also we're just seeing that incorporation, it's always been there. Even to where the dreadlock thing that I'm seeing, they're trying to connect that to the Predator in those movies, how they have those dreadlocks. So they're throwing it off by putting the insectoid reptilian face on it. Really, they're supposed to represent these Andromedan women.
And yet, in fact, those Andromedan women are also some of the ones that was propagating parthenogenesis, where they were basically able to procreate without a man being present, right? Because one thing you got to understand about the woman's mitochondrial DNA is connected to the Fibonacci sequence of Mother Nature, right? So her DNA is connected to the matriarch, which is her ethereal core, her ether, her dreadlocks, her birthright is connected to planet Earth, right? Her Ethereal cord is connected to planet Earth by way of her genetics. So that's how you know that it was all women on the planet at one point in time, because Earth is a feminine planet, but it was subjugated by the patriarch. Because the moon is a representation in the embodiment of patriarchy, because it pulls off the energy of women. This is why women, their cycles operate on the four phases of the moon, right? That is basically stealing and extracting your energy. Now we in the sun cycle, that's the restoration of the matriarch. So they got to give you the truth about who the real women are, coming from different star systems. They got to give you the truth about, extraterrestrial species and how they're basically highly melanated or highly neuromelanated with the non-ether genetics, right? This is why it's imperative to understand who you are historically, spiritually, and genetically. Because it all works in tandem when you're talking about the spiritual metamorphosis of planet Earth as we're going through the Great Awakening cosmic shift for the cosmic convergence, right? Because one thing you gotta understand about Donald Trump, like I said, he's a double agent. And a lot of the edification that we need to ascend to the fifth dimensional reality, to where you're going to have this great separation, right? And you're going to leave people behind. A lot of this truth has to come out, right? Because you got a lot of people who are submerged by the, politics and religion. They just, that's the only faction. They're just so one-dimensional that that's the only thing they basically understand in life. And they're not going to make it, right? They're not going to be able to deal with that the angels in the Bible are not Caucasian. They got to deal with the fact that these angels who are actually extraterrestrials are actually black women, right? So that's why it's imperative to understand what's going on when it comes to extraterrestrial species and things of that nature. That's why it's important to understand it. Because one thing you got to understand about, when it comes to UFOs and crafts and shams or whatever, you have to use your spiritual discernment. The reason I say that is because you have to basically decipher and delineate what is a government craft or what is the craft that is being flown by the Majestic 12, right? Which is comprised of, your Zeta Reticuli, your Draconian, and your Insectoids, right? So that faction, when you look at UFO crafts, if they have a white light, that is being flown by the government. That is being flown by the Majestic 12, right? If you see a spacecraft or a UFO or sham has a multicolored light, that denotes the fact that it's operating on fourth octave ether, right? And fourth octave ether has the ability to manipulate the subatomic particles to basically extract energy, electrical energy, in order to cloak itself, right? So that means that it's working off the acoustic supersonic energies of the ether that is connected to certain color spectrums, right? Is working on acoustic frequencies, oscillating signals of electrical energy. That's how you know that our ancestors are people that's coming from different dimensional realities, coming from beyond the ice wall. That's how you know who's using these spacecrafts. If they have multicolored lights, just like what you're seeing on my chair right here, right? Because everything we do operates by way of a multicolored frequency. Because frequencies of many different colors is basically a logistical order of alignment, right? So we're going to get into the presentation. Now, all this stuff is going on with Trump. You know what I'm saying? We got 41 billion of World Bank's climate change fund has gone missing, right? $41 billion just don't come up missing. That money is being taken to prepare for a shift that's going to be taking place, which is why it's connected to the World Economic Forum, right? Which works in tandem with the World Health Organization, right? Now it talks about how Trump, the economic challenges facing the Trump administration, because one thing you got to understand about the Roman occupational government that was working in tandem with the demo system of democracy, one thing you got to understand about it is that it was cultivated by the secret treaty of Verona, which created the corporation. The corporation was being ran by the three city states. So it's basically a defunct government that basically has no funding because it's not backed by a natural resource. Since it's not backed up by a natural resource, this is why we got to convert over to cryptocurrencies and things of that nature, XRP, Bitcoin, or whatever, because those is being backed by a natural resource, right? It's not fiat currency. So that's also correlated with the, universal based income. That's going to be all correlated when you're talking about, Elon Musk and Donald Trump working in tandem together when you're talking about the totalitarian dystopian system, right? So now we got this right here. The United States had an intelligence detail Ukrainian plan to, the pipeline, right? So you got all this stuff because one thing you got to understand about the Ukrainian mafia, right? The Ukrainian mafia is also coming from the faction of the Amorite bloodline, which is the Canaanite, which is the Edomite, which is the cursed seed of Leviticus 14:33, right? The cursed seed that was controlling the corporation. Now the corporation has seized itself because Donald Trump, he signed the Second Declaration of Independence on July the 4th of 2020, which was the beginning points of the restoration of the republic. So now that we have the restoration of a republic, this is where you start to get a transition, a transitional shift. This is a reset, right? During the time of when Pluto enters Aquarius, so it's going to get very chaotic. It's going to get extremely chaotic, right? Because one thing you got to understand is that it's all being staged. Trump is a double agent, right? So, like I said, all this stuff works in tandem with the deep state shadow government that is being controlled by the demo system of democracy. You got the anonymous aid leaks. Kamala Harris rejected 10 million proposal to target black voters, right? So this is for all the Kamala, the Chucks and Pearls and all that, all that BS, right? Her dancing at the cookout, eating sweet potatoes and greens and things of that nature. Y'all fell for the technology and the semantics. Y'all fell for that. Y'all falling for all these old tricks that they was pulling on y'all since the early 2000s. And y'all still haven't evolved mentally in order to understand that ideology and understand that you're dealing with a certain faction of people who is using psychological operations to basically extract your energy to pull you into a fraudulent voting system. Because when you participate in fraud, you can't claim injury to the system by way of the 14th Amendment, which makes you a United States citizen, which makes you a municipal slave to the corporate infrastructure of democracy, right? So that was their last chance to pull you back into the demo system. But like I said, you can't have a democracy in a sun cycle. That's matriarch. That's republic. That's why Donald Trump has been president even when Joe Biden was in office, because that was basically an illegal inauguration. He was inaugurated before 12 p.m. and they ain't even have the, correct Bible out there. And nor did they have the real United States American flag. Right? Now, I want to make sure I ain't got no videos because I'm, going too far into the video. But yeah, all this stuff is going on with the economic stuff, right? So look, so all this stuff with the economic challenges facing Donald Trump, administration. So this is where, they do the Hegelian dialectic principle, problem, reaction, solution. The financial infrastructure is going to collapse in the time of the cosmic serpent, the year of 2025. The 2025 is the year of the serpent. The last time the stock market crashed and you had a Great Depression was in 1929. That was also the year of the serpent. So now you fast forward into the year of 2025. Don't be surprised when the whole economic infrastructure is eradicated, which basically is going to be connected to a form of a cybernetic dictatorship that is being controlled by artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is starting to take over the jobs, which basically demonstrates this in this video. Amazon employees were fired without notice. What do you think about this? That's because, like I said, we coming into a time right now where whatever they got to do for the agenda for 2030, they got to demonstrate it from now to 2025, 26, 27, all the way up until the end. And one thing you got to understand, Pluto will still be in Aquarius. Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 19 years, beginning to end, Alpha and Omega, right? Prepare, because you're going to see more of this. This is the precursor to your universal based income. This is the precursor to when we have another lockdown. And if you don't take the draconian juice, you're going to be without a job, right? You're going to be without a job. All that's coming during the time when Pluto's in Aquarius. It's going to get very chaotic. Have you ever seen that movie Demolition Man? Right? Those who basically didn't conform to the system, they went underground, right? They had their own autonomous civilization underground, while the people who conformed to the system that was connected to a form of artificial intelligence, that was basically demonstrating that faction. So you got to watch the movie with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes called Demolition Man. It's talking about everything I'm talking about because it coincides with the whole blueprint of Donald Trump and Elon Musk having a totalitarian, cybernetic, artificial intelligence-based civilization, right? Because like I said, one thing they want to do with the artificial intelligence and the nanotechnology, they want to upload your thoughts into a cyber cloud, right? Because they want to read your mind. Because that's what, one world government is basically all about. It's all about controlling the mental. Now this is where we get into this. It says breaking. Trump may appoint Cash Patel as an FBI director to clean house. So like I said, he's draining the swamp, but he's also a part of the swamp. Trump is not your savior. I get tired of y'all talking about, oh, no, I voted for Trump. Trump is for us. Yeah, he has to restore the matriarch, because if you don't restore the matriarch in the republic, you're going to be breaking cosmic law. You're going to be breaking universal law. So that's why I said it has nothing to do with how many votes Kamala had. It has nothing to do with that shit. It's all about the precessional circle of the equinox. You cannot have a democracy in a sun cycle, right? A sun cycle is for the republic, and a republic is for the matriarch. So him restoring the matriarch, you know, he has to do that, right? He has to abide by certain covenants, certain treaties that he made with the Galactic Federation. This is why, you know, you seeing all this stuff about the propagation of extraterrestrials and stuff like that. All that works in conjunction with the socio-political aspect of civics. All that works in conjunction with government. All that works in conjunction with the agenda for 2030 and the sustainable development goals, right? So it talks about this. Diddy staffer testifies. Now, I ain't gonna say their names, but you can see it clear. It talks about, you know, them people that was in that White House many years ago, and they was at these freak offs with Diddy, and they on camera, right? So I'm not gonna, you know, read out this publication. You can, you know, I'll let you read it for a little bit, but it basically demonstrates how now this is where you're gonna start to get a multitude of black swan events, because the more the truth comes out, because of the restoration of the republic by way of Donald Trump. Because one thing you got to understand about the restoration of the republic, right? The drafted Declaration of Indigenous People coincides with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that Obama had to sign in 2008. He had to sign the Indigenous People Act, right? Because it basically eradicates the process of democracy that's connected to civil rights. You don't ask for civil rights, you ask for human rights, right? Human rights for indigenous people in a matriarch. We in a sun cycle now, right? Because that's where you get your self-governance of autonomy. That's where that comes from. So that's why it's important to stop asking for the money and get the land back. We don't give a damn about no reparations to get the land, because when you get the land, that's when you become sovereign. Being sovereign, being a sovereign citizen has nothing to do with you signing paperwork. When you sign over your nature to their system, it's going to put you right back into their system. You don't fight the corporation with paperwork. You fight the corporation by getting the land back. That's how you become sovereign. You got to have land in order to be a sovereign citizen, right? So, you know, you got all this stuff about, you know, them people that was at them Diddy parties. So they're going to create a multitude of afflictions that's going to be taking place on the planet when you're talking about the things that's going to be happening on American soil. And it's basically going to be a form of a revolution that's going to be taking place. We don't know if the grid is going to shut down. We don't know if there's going to be sleeper cells going to be activated. We don't know. There are so many ways, you know, they can basically, you know, create, you know, a dynamic to where they can basically shut down everything within westernized infrastructure. They can basically eradicate everything. And it's all going to be coming from the left. So like I said, you having a government within the government fighting amongst each other. But it's a stage show, right? It's all orchestrated. It's all premeditated. Stop falling for this. They following a script, right? Now, make sure I don't want to get too far. Now, so since we were talking about the sleeper cells, right? Now this is where we get into, you know, so you got the, you know, all the way up until the time of when Donald Trump gets actually in office after the inauguration or whatever, you know, the Democrats, they still have those borders open, right? And they're going to be open until he's in office, right? So it talks about how a caravan of 3,000 migrants head towards the United States southern border, right? So this is where this is all being demonstrated. This is all being orchestrated because this is where you're going to have the activation of sleeper cells, right? Which can potentially cause a civil war. Just like when I was talking about in the beginning of the video, when you had the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Irish Rebellion, the American Revolution, all that stuff happened during the time when Pluto was in Aquarius. And Pluto's in Aquarius for 19 years. So whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen. You just got to be prepared for it. And I got a video that's going to give you the preparation and the resources in order to combat the energy of the negative affliction that's going to be propagated by the deep state shadow government. Well, I'm going to show you this video here.
Caravan of approximately 3,000 migrants leaving Tapachula in southern Mexico is heading to the U.S. southern border. The group of migrants is made up of people from Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Haiti, Costa Rica, Panama, Nepal, Afghanistan, and Central America, La Verdad reports. The migrants are hoping to make their way to the United States before President-elect Donald Trump takes office on January 20th. As the migrants make the trek, some say they're leaving their countries because where they're from is dangerous. They have no security or job opportunities to support their families. Cartel violence, high unemployment, and economic crises in South and Central America are driving more people toward the United States. A caravan.
See, when that time, like, walls are starting to close in on everything within the simulation. So that's why it's imperative to be very meticulous of your surroundings when it comes to migrants. I'm not saying because they bad people. Everybody, has the right to revitalize their life if they was in a state of degradation. Everybody has the right to do that. It's your birthright to do that. Right? Now, let's see. I've got 2 videos there left. Now, you got Trump's dire warning to Iran, right? Because we got a multitude of things. So this coincides, this energy right here coincides with the electrical energy grid that I've been talking about, right? The cosmic energy grid that can possibly go down with an EMP attack. So you also got this right here, mystery. FEMA staging 350 semi-trailers at decommissioned Air Force Base in Oscoda. So, like I said, why is that happening? Because one thing you got to understand about FEMA is being controlled by the continuity of government, right? Meaning that Donald Trump has qualified immunity over FEMA because he signed the Emergency Declaration Act, basically. He signed the Emergency Declaration Bill, right? So this is why we got to prepare for everything. I don't think we're ready for that video yet. See, now we basically are. So this coincides with everything I was talking about everything I was talking about Project Zypher and Project Pogo. How they basically want to unalive many different, factions of Americans. But it's going to be subjected to a certain demographic. And that demographic in itself is going to be so-called indigenous people or so-called black people, right? And it's also going to happen during the time when you have a 37-day outage. So what you're looking at right now are the notes of David Goldberg. These are some of his notes talking about how they're going to have a purging program with the government that works in tandem with FEMA that is being controlled by the militarized groups of the United Nations under a one world government. They're going to start targeting melanated people, right? And I'm gonna demonstrate that in this video right here. This guy, he had a dream, and he had a dream that the government was coming after indigenous people, right? So get your popcorn. If you're new to the channel, subscribe to the channel, because there's nobody giving you this type of edification, and there's nobody giving you this edification in a form of clarity. I'm showing you receipts. I'm showing you videos. I'm making everything basically make sense, right? So, yeah, we're going to get into this video. This guy had a dream about indigenous people being attacked by the government. So, watch this video.
Talk family. I gotta tell you guys about this really, really crazy dream that I had last night. I just thought I'd share it with you guys. I still can't believe what I saw in this dream. Kind of scares me at the same time. I'll tell you guys about it. So I end up going on top of this hill. It was like a valley, and there's this hill. There's like a hill there. So I was walking to this hill, and I see these four elderly indigenous men. They're sitting in a circle, and they have rocks around them, and they're sitting in this circle, and they're speaking, and they're dressed like from a long time ago, you know, like buckskin, like buckskin stuff on, like chiefs, but like dressed from a long time ago. Like they weren't in this time, you know what I mean? Like, but in this dream, one of the first elders looks at me, and he tells me to come closer into that circle. He tells me, and they're speaking in their own language, but I can understand them. But he tells me to sit down. Needs to tell me some important stuff to tell our indigenous brothers and sisters out there. And I look at him and I'm like, I'm dreaming, right? Am I in a dream? He goes, you're on the other side, he says. But we need to tell you this, he says. It's a warning. We want you to tell.
Remember, he just said it's a warning. Remember that according to Jonah chapter 3, verse 4 in the Bible, it talks about how Nineveh shall be overthrown. Nineveh is a nomenclature title for America, which is basically the United States, because Nineveh was a part of the Assyrian Empire that was connected to Babylon. America is New Age Babylon that they speak of in the Bible when you're talking about Nineveh. So that was an omen when you're talking about that solar eclipse, which was basically the black sun, right? That basically put an aleph over the planet, or an aleph over the geographical area of America. So there's an omen that's going to be propagated during the time of when Pluto's in Aquarius, right? I need you to understand that. You got to follow the timeline. You got to go back and look at some of my videos, because each video is one big esoteric puzzle piece. Each video is connected to another video. So that's why it's imperative to understand and get through these videos and watching. I'm going to play the video. My bad to interject. My bad.
In the dream, he goes, you're on the other side, he says. But we need to tell you this, he says. It's a warning. We want you to tell all the indigenous people about that, all our people. He goes, we were alive a long time ago, before your time, he tells me. And then he starts bringing up like Custer, and starts bringing up these different things, right? Like about like that time, said that they were around that time. But he said he has something really important to tell me. He tells me just to sit there and listen. So I'm listening to him. And he tells me like the four of them that are sitting there, he says that they're there. He goes, we're your ancestors, and we're speaking to you from the other side, because we need to tell you something. He says, listen. And he starts speaking. So the first one speaks to me, and he tells me that I want you to tell everybody to be ready. He goes, Damunyao, he says. So he says, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but what he said was, he says the white man. That's what he says. That's what he says. And he's not just referring to all of you, you know, nothing like that. If you're watching this, it's nothing to offend you. You know, it's, for me, I take it as like it's some people, right? That's what I think. But he starts going on about it, and he starts talking about these RCMP. And he starts talking about the military. He said that they were going to try to wipe out indigenous.
You know, what's crazy about everything that he's basically saying is basically talking about the mobilization of the factions of the United Nations military that works in tandem with FEMA, because FEMA is being controlled by Donald Trump. through the Emergency Declaration Act, right? The National Declaration of Emergency Act. And now when you're talking about the grid going down, that's when they're gonna, purge against indigenous people. They showed you in that one movie, in the Purge movie, I think it's called The First Purge, when they show all the great majority of all those black people, so-called black people, they were stranded on Staten Island, and they was coming for all indigenous people, right? You got all these movies. Hey, that's part of our homework. Watch that movie. Watch Demolition Man and watch The First Purge, the one they were stuck in New York and they couldn't, go to other boroughs or whatever because it was a purging program going on, right? So all this stuff works in tandem. So they're going to start coming after, indigenous people, right? And he's seeing this in the dream. And fast forward to everything that's going on right now in the physical world, it all, the synchronicities is sinking.
RCMP. And he starts talking about the military. He said that they were going to try to wipe out indigenous people completely. They were going to try to wipe us out completely. So there is no indigenous people at all. And that scared me. It shook me up.
Because one of the main criteria about this government is all about genetical self-preservation. They have to preserve a certain demographic of people in order to survive the shift in the next timeline because they don't have the genetics. Everything comes down to your genetical structure when you're talking about the apex of the Great Awakening process. That's what it's really all about.
They were going to try to wipe us out completely. So there is no indigenous people at all. And that scared me. It shook me up. He said that they were going to try to take us out first. Because all the stuff that's going on and how we're starting to finally have success in something, he was saying, they don't like that. About taking the land back, they don't like that. He goes, they know about it. He goes, you guys they're gonna take you out. He goes, I want you to tell people that they're already gonna be starting that. So he's telling me in this dream. And then the other elder comes up to me, has braids, gray braids, has a feather on his head. And he starts talking to me. And then he said that anybody that has indigenous blood in them, even just a little bit of blood, he told me that if they're Métis, they're still indigenous. He said, they're going to get them too. He said, he goes, they're going to take you here. And he shows me this place, shows me this, like, you know what a lab looks like? Kind of like a lab. But he shows me this area and it shows them injecting these Métis with something that just completely like takes them out of the world. They don't exist no more.
And that coincides with the next shutdown we're going to have with the draconian juice. A lot of you are going to fall for it, right? This is where the great separation comes in.
And I see them doing this to children too. And they hear them talking and they say, we're going to get every last one of them. So there's no indigenous blood, no bloodline. They're going to try to wipe it out. Kind of like how dinosaurs were extinct, that's what they're going to try to do. That's what he was basically telling me. And that third elder, he just told me, be ready. I want you to tell everybody that some of these RCMP will just be coming in houses. He says, our military, he says, they'll be coming out and they'll be taking out indigenous people. They'll be taking you out of your homes. He says, be ready. This is a warning, he says. That time's come. He goes, be ready to fight. That's what he says. And he starts like yelling about it, yelling at me about it. Be ready, like telling me, be ready for it. And that fourth elder, that fourth elder has a pipe in his hand and a smudge bowl in front of them, and then they're smudging everybody, and he ends up smudging me. And he says he's praying. He's praying that our people's minds wake up. And he said, a lot of our people are lost. He starts mentioning all this stuff, social media, everything. He just starts talking about everything. He says that our own people are fighting each other, he says. That's not where the fight is, he says. And he says, you know, every color in the world, he goes, we're all connected, we're one. But this government, he says, this government is going to try to wipe the native people out first. And the people that are supporting them will be wiped out with them. That's what he was saying. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, is that really going to happen? He goes, it's going to be starting soon. He says it will be happening. And I want you to warn everybody about it. But he goes, everybody united, that whoever unites with the indigenous people, they will be stronger together. He goes, with our people, we will protect the ones that need to be protected, he said. He goes, if it's necessary, we'll protect the ones that need to be protected. And he says, a lot of us will turn to the mountains where they can't find us because the mountains will hide us. That's what he says. And he goes, I want you to warn everybody about that. You know, that, like I said, this dream shook me up. I was telling my wife about it. But please share this video. You know, this is one of my strongest dreams I've ever had, you know, like crazy vision, man. Crazy. We got to be strong and be ready, you guys, for whatever's coming. Love one another. You know, like don't fight one another because we're going to need each other in the end. That's my story, my dream. I hope you guys share it. And, you know, it's a crazy warning. Take care.
So
how's it going, TikTok fan?
So that's all coincides with Project Pogo and Project Zypher when you're talking about the purging process, which also coincides with the Great Purification. So all that Great Purification is connected to the abomination of desolation. That desolation process of them trying to exterminate a certain faction of people, right? That's all, you know, that's going to create this. It's going to create another Seminole War, another Haitian Revolution. Because, of course, we're going to fight back, right? And he said that we all going to go to the mountains. Why is that? Because a lot of the mountains, or whatever, they're esoteric doorways to other dimensional realities when you're talking about Hollow Earth, right? And he also has a part 2 to his dream as well. I'm going to play this for a second.
How's it going, my indigenous brothers and sisters? This is part 2 to my dream. In this dream, like I had a dream last night again, and this is connected to the first dream that I had with the elders. You know, the ancestors that I was talking about. But this dream was crazy. It was crazy to come back to that, you know, that same dream. But it was weird because I was standing there again, and those 4 elders, you know, when they warned us about what was coming, it's crazy because out of nowhere, they tell me to come in there, back into that circle on top of that hill. And the elder tells me to come into that circle, and he's holding a staff. He's holding a staff in his hand. and tells me to wait right there. And this older elder man, he was really old, like his hair was down, and I'm talking to him. Tells me to stand there and hold that staff. Tells me that I'm one of the ones that's gonna lead Cree people. So I'm listening to him. He said that's the reason you have these visions, these dreams, because we come to our younger generation, because they're the ones that are going to carry our people. They're going to have that wisdom. And he tells me I'm not the only one. He said a lot of us are going to find each other. A lot of us that are going to lead our own tribes with all these warnings, with these visions, these dreams. And he tells me to look in the corner of me, look on my right. So I look on my right, and this other indigenous man comes over, and he's Navajo. It was like every different tribe was there, but he came and he was holding a staff too. And he was like, I'm 40, and this guy was probably a bit younger than I was. But he comes forward and he's holding a staff too. Another one comes forward. Each different tribe, there were young men. One guy had braids, the other one had long hair, and they were young guys, young warriors, and they were all coming forward. I even seen an Inuit man. We all were holding a staff, but this young Inuit man come forward, and he's supposed to be leading his people because he's having those same visions, those dreams, and he's supposed to be telling his own people about what's coming, and people will listen to him. His staff was not like our staff. His looked like, something to do with a whale.
Now,
like a
pause. Now I'm gonna interject. He said something. He had a staff and it had like a whale on it, right? Because one thing you got to understand about a whale, the whale basically is the embodiment of the transformation between life and death, which coincides with the prophecy of Jonah, right? Nineveh shall be overthrown when it talks about that prophecy. So you're talking about a transition between life and death during the time of when Pluto enters Aquarius. We're in that time right now. So it's not a coincidence that he's seen that in his dream, right? Because that's what a whale basically represents. So it's connected to that biblical scripture when you're talking about Jonah chapter 3, verse 4, right? Now, back to the video.
like a spear that come from a whale, like a whale's nose or something. And it was really long anyway, and he was holding that. And he looked at me and he shook my hand. We were all shaking each other's hands. And this elderly man told us to listen carefully. He said, we're all going to get connected. You young men are going to get connected with each other. And each and every one of you that are having these different visions, these dreams, we're letting you dream it, he says. Where your ancestors were coming to you so you guys can warn the people. So he's telling us that, and each and every one of us are looking at each other. And we're talking. We're sitting there in that circle, talking, all of us. And we're connected, and he's telling us what's coming, that how they're going to try to take us indigenous people out, and we're going to be the ones that warn everybody. And our own people will follow. That's what he told me. Our own people will follow. He was telling all of us that. Each one of us were looking there, and he goes that we're going to find each other. He said all of us are going to find each other. All the people that are having these dreams are going to be connected. Our indigenous brothers will come together. And our women, he said, will have these visions too and stand by our men. And he says,
like one thing you got to understand about the spiritual and the physical afflictions that's going to be taking place while Pluto's in Aquarius, it's going to force you into unity. It's going to force you into the cosmic convergence. It's going to force the galvanization of the 144,000. It's going to force everybody to be together, right? And it's going to be for the people, which is a republic, a matriarch. So by way of nature, we all going to have to come together eventually in order to combat the system.
Bond together. Love one another. Don't fight one another. Be strong for one another. He says you guys are the one that are going to be holding each other. Nobody will fall. But warn our people, he says. And we're looking at this old elderly man. He looked older than all of them, like he was just standing there talking to us. And I just, I couldn't believe what I was looking at, because he was showing us stuff and he told us to hold our staffs ahead of us. So we held our staffs in front of us. And when we put our staffs down, he told us to hit it once. He said, hit your staff down once. And we hit our staffs down once, and we just got, it was like you saw all these bad things happening to our indigenous people. We seen that. A lot of us seen that. And, seeing what we saw, I saw, families being destroyed, like hurt, indigenous people crying. All I can see is crying, tears. And it shows all of us getting together, all of us brothers standing there with our staffs. And it was like we were trying to watch over one another. And each and every one of us took our own path out. He told us to go back to our people and warn our people about this, what's coming. He said there's going to be a big fight, and it's going to be with our indigenous people. He goes, they're going to try to take indigenous people out. And he, like I said, it's the second part to that dream. And he was showing us that. And he goes, our young warriors, you guys are our young warriors. You guys are the vision seekers. You guys are the ones that are carrying those visions. We want you to share them now. He just starts telling me that. And he tells the next person that, and he's lecturing us. He's giving us lectures. He said the reason he gave this to us is because when you have a kind heart, he said, when you believe in your own culture, when you don't believe, you won't have these visions, you won't have these dreams. He goes, but when you believe really deep in your culture, that's why we come to you. He goes, you guys are that medicine. Telling us that. And he said that all of us that are standing here together, and it showed us all come from different areas. And he is telling us, you guys are going to meet. You guys are going to meet some way, one way or another. You guys are going to be connected. You're going to meet, and you guys are going to be telling your people about these visions. One person will have a vision about this. The other will have the other piece to the puzzle, he said. And the other one will have the other piece to the puzzle. People need to listen to you guys because we're trying to speak through you guys. And he goes, wake up. He tells me that. And looks at the other guys. He says, the guy that was speaking to me was Cree. He is Cree because I'm Cree. And he goes, Wanska. Says that over and over, Wanska. And the other ones, he was like changing his languages to different languages for each different culture. And he would speak to them and telling them to wake up. He goes, it's time. He says that we're going to go back into the forest. We're going to know how to survive in it. He said, we know how to take care of our land. It's time to do that again, he said. We all got to get together, he says. Those tough times are here. It's upon us. Wake up, he says. With anger, He just says it to us with anger. Wake up. And he said that we're going to meet each other. All of us will find each other. And then I woke up and I told my wife that. I said I wanted to finish that dream and I just have to wake up. But I hope whoever's watching this, if you're one of those ones that are having those dreams and I hope you watch this video because we're going to be connected. We're going to meet. Start telling your dreams. That's how we help our people. How's it going, my indigenous brother?
Now, one thing you got to understand about the intelligence that's streaming down from the magnetosphere is going to activate a spiritual and a genetical metamorphosis. So it's going to be certain things that you didn't know that you knew how to do. You're just going to end up tapping into it, right? It's going to come down to a point where it's going to activate your epigenetics. Your epigenetics is connected to your Zohar body, which is connected to the 5 overselves, right? And the reason I'm giving you that demonstration about that is because when we go back into these woods and when we got to hide out and, fight against, the system or whatever, and we all got to come together in a form of unification, a lot of us is going to remember how to do certain things that we did in our past lives. So that's why it's important to understand that even though a lot of stuff that's, extrapolating and proliferating numbers in the physical world, you cannot negate the fact that it's also being, facilitated in the spiritual world at the same time. Now, when you look at this publication right here, it shows you Donald Trump. He is basically the personification of the hangman. He is the hangman that basically is eradicating the deep state shadow government, right? Which is why you see the obelisk being torn down in Washington, D.C., which is basically connected to the 3 city states of Vatican, London, and DC, because DC has a pillar there because they control the military. So that's why the pillar right next to Donald Trump, as him being the hangman, is being torn down, basically, right? Because he took over the faction by having continuity of government with the emergency declaration of emergency act that is connected to FEMA, right? All this stuff is being orchestrated. Symbolism is going to be their downfall. So if you understand the esoteric symbolism, you can understand what's going on and what's going to take place in the future. Just like I said, it was either going to be Donald Trump. It's either he was going to be in office or we're not going to have an election, right? And I basically base it on the processional circle, right? Simple mathematics. Now this coincides with this video right here, right? So this is a guy who was working with David Goldberg, and he's also a CIA whistleblower. And he's also talking about Project Zypher, and he's going to give you the resources and the blueprint and how to have an exodus strategy when all this stuff is being cultivated by, Donald Trump and the Trump administration, the agenda for 2030, all this afflictions that's going to be taking place on American soil. He's basically giving you the blueprint and the steps to basically prepare and have the resources in order to combat that energy. Listen to the video, please.
Your government is totally evil. It's not that the U.S. government's corrupt. They're corrupt and evil. That's the hell state that you're living in right now. And it's going to get a heck of a lot worse real soon. But I want to show you that there's another world out there. A world where there's still family values, where there's still good people, where the governments might be corrupt, but they're not evil and they're not out to get you. Places that don't have a surveillance grid, places that don't have the underground bases, places that don't have militarized police. When you look at these photographs, I want you to think about the life that you can have and the future you can have, where the cost of living is way lower than the United States. So we're going to walk through some steps that you need to think about as you're planning on how to get out. You've got about a year. You've got a year. You've got time. But if you do...
Notice he said, you said, we got about a year. He said, we got time. You got enough time to get your shit together, get your ducks in a row, crossing your T's and dot your I's, get your finances and everything in order, get your household in order, right? Because, unity, the precursor to unity starts in the household, right? Because if you can lead and galvanize your own autonomous infrastructure, you will be able to demonstrate that when you basically amongst other people, who have, like-minded individuals, really, right? this is where the unification process is going to take place.
Allie, and you don't get off. You look at these photographs, I want you to think about the life that you can have and the future you can have, where the cost of living is way lower than the United States. So we're going to walk through some steps that you need to think about as you're planning on how to get out. You've got about a year. You've got a year. You've got time. But if you dilly-dally and you don't get on this, it's going to be too late. This is it. I wanted to get this video out because the time frame is closing in on people. I mean, there's not a lot of time left. So let's start here. And I hope you listen to the entire video because there's some things I'm going to talk about toward the end of this video you really need to listen to. You really need to listen to it. So I'm going to save it for the end. Let's walk through the steps here. You've got to get started. You need enough money to live on for 1 to 2 years without working. Now, that might sound like a lot, but it's not that bad. Think about between 20 and 60,000 minimum. You know, it may sound like a lot to some people, but if you sell everything, if you really hunker down, you might be able to pull it off. Number 2, you definitely need to get your passport. You're not going to be able to get a passport without some kind of microchip. I want you to pick, number 3, I want you to pick the country you want to go to in the Southern Hemisphere. Do your research, find a place you want to go, and focus on it. There's a lot to choose from, and there are some in Central America that are okay too. Not ideal to go to Central America, but it's way better than staying in the United States. Mexico is better than staying in the United States. These countries just don't have the surveillance grid. So once you get into them, you're going to be able to get out of the surveillance grid where they're not going to be able to track you in the same way they can in the U.S. If there's a couple countries to avoid, it's Venezuela and Brazil. You want to stay away from those. Panama is a little too cozy with the United States. I would not go there. I don't believe either. But, because, again, they're a little too cozy with the U.S. Number 4, you want to look into residency permits, work permits, student visas in these countries. Do a little research on that. The good news is for most U.S. citizens, you can stay in these countries for between 3 and 6 months without any paperwork. That's going to get you in the door. And once you're in the door, you can start working on staying longer term. If somehow, for whatever reason, you get to one of these countries and you can't stay beyond 3 to 6 months, the good news is you just go on to the next country. If you go to Peru and you got to leave in 3 months, you just move on to Ecuador. You got to think like that. Now, as you're planning this, number 6, you're going to sell all your assets. You're going to take out loans, take out credit cards. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, too. And before you leave, you want to make sure you have multiple bank accounts in the United States, 2 or 3 of them. Prepaid debit cards, which are excellent. Cash, no more than $10,000. Don't take more than that on the plane. You want to take about $3,000 or $4,000 in U.S. dollars in cash. And if you can convert to the currency that you're going to be going to before you leave, that's a good idea too. Traveler's checks, and you want to have Bitcoin. If you don't have Bitcoin,
make sure you screenshot and everything that that's basically being shown on the screen.
Get it. The reason I say you need to get it is because it's very mobile. You can take Bitcoin anywhere in the world. You can use it anywhere. It has a lot of uses, and they can't freeze your Bitcoins the way they can freeze your bank accounts. Does that make sense? Once you've got Bitcoins, they can't take it from you. Unless you're storing your Bitcoins in an exchange or doing something dumb like that. If you've got your Bitcoins in a personal wallet, they can't take it from you. And you can exchange those Bitcoins all over the world. So think about it. Now, some people think that somehow Bitcoin is satanic or something. I've heard weird theories. That is not true at all. It has nothing to do with the mark of the beast. It is possible in the future they may have some kind of digital currency that they're going to establish with the one world government. That is possible. I do not believe it's going to be Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin, they just don't have the control over Bitcoin. They can't control it. It's almost impossible for the government to step in and stop Bitcoin or control Bitcoin because it's something called decentralized. What they want is a centralized cryptocurrency, which would be like something called XRP. XRP is a centralized coin that governments could control. Libra. Anyway, I don't want to get into that too much. I'm just saying Bitcoin would be smart to have. I don't know how much you'd want, but probably a few thousand. It's really good to have a few thousand in Bitcoin in a wallet that you're going to put on a little USB drive and take with you on the plane. Or you can even have it on your phone. You want to learn a little bit about that. It's something I learned about quite a while back. I got quite an education, especially when I met David, and he introduced me to it pretty much. Before I met David, I didn't know much about it, but he really gave me an education on it because he was really into it. He had a lot of Bitcoin. He had millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin himself. So I recommend it. Now, again, some people come up with these theories about Bitcoin that it's somehow part of the New World Order. No, it's not. It's impossible. It's impossible because it's not a centralized coin. They can't control it. It's virtually impossible for them to take over Bitcoin. They would have to destroy it and start over. I mean, you can't do it in terms of how it's not owned by anybody. Yeah, so Bitcoin, I think, is safe. There's other cryptocurrencies that are safe. What the government's going to try to do is establish what's called a centralized currency that they control. XRP, Libra, whatever. There's some other ones they're trying to cook up. You want to stay away from those. So I hope that this gives people an idea, a way forward. Now, I'm going to talk about a few things that I hope you stuck around for. First of all, who's running the whole show? Well, they're Satanists, but specifically they're Luciferians. They're 17 and Frankists. Now, I sent the friends of David Goldberg.
Now, I'm going to cut it there short because I got to go pick up my son here in a second from school. But that basically, I hope you took a picture of that, of the resources and the blueprint to follow when, things get really hectic during the time of the Great Awakening period. So Trump is the hangman, which basically is the embodiment of wisdom, sacrifice, intuition, divination, prophecy, right? So that's basically is being demonstrated right here. Now, this is where we get into the esoteric sacred geometry standpoint of the presentation. So Donald Trump is basically the embodiment of the 45th president. 4 + 5 = 9. Then he's also the 47th president, right? Which 4 + 7 = 11. Then you get 9/11. So there's going to be a 9/11 event that's going to be taking place during the time of his presidency. Because one thing you got to understand about the number 9 represents finality, completion. 11 is the gateway to trials and tribulations, which is chaos, right? It's the gateway to chaos because we know that this is the end of the corporate system of the simulation, right? Because one thing you got to understand about the number 11 is also the embodiment of the two pillars in Freemasonry called Jack and Boaz, right? York Rite, Scottish Rite. That's why I said that Donald Trump is a double agent. He is playing both sides. He's York and Scottish Rite. He's a Knights of Malta and he's a Knights of Templar, right? So he's playing both sides because he has to bring in this energy, right? But you also can't negate the fact that Donald Trump is also the 19th president of the Republic. So you got Pluto in Aquarius on November 19th for 19 years, and Donald Trump is the 19th president of the Republic. And he's also on a corporate level, he was the 45th president, which equates to 9. And then on the corporate level, on his other term as being the 47th president, that also represents the 11, which is when you look at it, from a different standpoint, you still get the number 19 because all this stuff works in conjunction. So numerology plays a big part of what's going on. So like I said, the 11 is basically the personification of the two pillars in Freemasonry, which is the embodiment of Jack and Boaz, right? The two pillars of chaos to where you get order, which is why you see the compass in the middle, right? Which represents Gnosis, Gnosticism, sacred geometry, right? And we're going to get into the sacred geometry of it because it coincides with the 47 problem of Euclid, right? So the Pythagorean 47 problem of Euclid is acclimated to Donald Trump because Donald Trump is what? The 47th president, right? This is where we get into the esoteric codex of it when you're talking about the Freemasonic principles, right? So the Pythagorean 47 problem of Euclid works in tandem with these 3 cubic structures right here, right? Which is basically the embodiment of man, woman, and child, or Isis, Osiris, and Horus, right? So that is basically the blueprint to the restoration of the Republic, which is a matriarch, because you can't have a matriarch without man, woman, and child. So they got this science from Kemetic spirituality. The Freemasons stole this edification from Kemetic spirituality, right? Because that's what the Pythagorean theorem of the 47 problem of Euclid, because that is basically the golden ratio of the golden age. Because the Pythagoras theorem, that's basically what it's demonstrating, because it is basically a microcosm of what takes place on the Giza Plateau when you're talking about the 3 pyramids. That's basically in alignment with with the Orion star constellation, right? So when you see these 3 pyramids, you're really talking about man, woman, and child, the microcosm aspect of it when you're talking about Kemetic spirituality, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, right? So that's where that science come from. So that means that the restoration of the Republic is connected to the Queen Mother seed. Then you got 4 plus 7 equals 11. So when we go through those pillars, the 2 pillars, you're going to get trials and tribulations that's going to bring the matriarch together during Trump's 47th presidency that coincides with the 47 problem of Euclid, restoration of the matriarch. That is the science of how all this works in conjunction with Freemasonry, that it's basically extracted from Kemetic spirituality, right? So here's a good book to read called The 47 Problem of Euclid and Freemasonry by H.P.H. Bromwell. Very good book to read. I got the PDF and I got a physical copy. Now, also, you cannot negate the fact that when you look at Donald Trump, like I said, he is the 47th president. So now when you go to Revelations 4:7, you got the 4 living creatures of Revelations that is connected to the seals in the 4 corners of the earth. And remember, I told you about the 4 gas giant planets that's going to be in our atmosphere until April 24th, right? Until April 24th. So the 4 gas giant planets, you got Jupiter, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus. Those 4 gas giant planets are basically the embodiment of the 4 horsemen that is also working in synergy with the 4 living creatures of Revelations 4:7 that is connected to the 47 problem of Euclid and Donald Trump, who was the 47th president, right? So this is basically the unlocking of the certain seals that's going to unlock certain dynamics of the 4 corners of the earth. during the age of Aquarius, which is the golden ratio, right? So with that being said, I'm going to give a brief rundown for a second because I got to go get my son. I got to go pick up my baby boy. He just had his birthday not too long ago. We got about, 60%, 50% of the people who watch the channel, they're not subscribed to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel so we can get this information out there. I'm trying to be a beacon of light in order, to put my resources and my information together. It's, just get the information out there. I don't ask y'all for money. I don't ask y'all for nothing. Only thing I ask y'all to do is just share the video, right? I just want to do my part. Can y'all do your part for me, right? So the last time, when you understand the historical context that everything operates on cylindrical cycles, right? So we're going through a shift. So the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, you had the Haitian Revolution, you had the French Revolution, you had the Irish Rebellion of 1798, then you also had the American Revolution, right? So all this stuff works in tandem with the timeline that we're basically in right now, because Donald Trump, he is basically eradicating the European occupational government that works in tandem with the Roman occupational government that controlled the three city-states. So all this stuff that you see taking place right now, all these meetings about UFOs, the meeting with the Federal Reserve, the meeting with many different countries, first of all, they're getting ready for full disclosure. They're getting ready for a financial collapse in the year of 2025, in the year of the snake, because the last time the stock market crashed was in the year of the snake in 1929. And then you also having UFO, they're coming out with many different things because they're going to hit you with affliction after affliction until they get chaos. And when they get chaos, this is when they're going to implement the New World Order. And it's going to give off this perception of progressiveness when really you're going backwards, because it's basically going to relinquish your rights to the system of the totalitarian system that's going to be controlled by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So you got all these, the UFO hearing, they got the memorandum for it, for Congress. All this stuff works in tandem with the metamorphic shift. It coincides with the economic shift. It coincides with the socio-political aspect of civics and the societal and the geopolitical economic reset that works in tandem with everything as far as like FEMA, Project Zypher, Project Pogo, right? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, please get this information out. It's imperative that we get the information out, because that's, it's a part of doing your job. Because, what I'm saying, one thing about chosen ones, just because you don't have a big platform, just because you don't feel like you have a voice, doesn't mean that you're not chosen. Sometimes that, you're chosen to basically propagate a certain blueprint. You're being used to demonstrate certain ideologies and cast them out to the media. Cast them out on social media to help other people, get clarification about what's taking place with the world's happenings, right? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're in that time right now. We're in a time of chaos and order. We're in a time where you must get your household in order, because everything on the timeline of Pluto in Aquarius on November 19th, this is the time where you got to get your household in order. This is all about the restoration of the republic, right? Because you can't have autonomy, you can't have unity unless you do it in your household first, right? So in my opinion, like I said, Donald Trump is a double agent, because he was the one that basically propagated, I think it was Agenda 2025 or Project 2025. Project 2025 was basically eradicating the illusionary dynamics that was connected to the Piscean age of darkness under the lunar cycle. Patriarchy in itself has no uphold or stronghold during the time of a sun cycle. We're in a sun cycle now, solar cycle 25. You're going to have all these colossal coronal mass ejections that's going to be hitting the planet, and it's going to expose everything in third density. you're going to have the Diddy list get exposed, right? You're going to have that island list get exposed. Full disclosure, economic crash, right? We got all these things to basically prepare for. Because one thing you got to understand is that you have a faction of government fighting against another faction of government, but it's all being premeditated and it's all being staged. It's being staged because they got to create a bad guy and they got to create the hero under the Hegelian dialectic principle. Problem, reaction, solution. The problem, deep state. Reaction, Donald Trump, who's going to be the hero, and their negative solution is going to be a one world government controlled by Elon Musk under artificial intelligence, right? That's what's taking place right now. But as the guy was talking about in the dream, right? You got the galvanized of 144,000, the cosmic convergence, calamity, desolation is going to bring us all together. Because when the grid goes down, that's when they're going to go after the demographics of the indigenous people. Get your resources in order. Know how to extract water from a tree. Grow fruit. You know what I'm saying? All these things, we got to learn how to do this stuff before shit hit the fan. Because shit is about to hit the fan pretty soon, because whatever they got to do for the sustainable development goals for Agenda for 2030, they got to get started in the year of 2025 while Pluto's in Aquarius. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. End of transmission.